There are some burdens we carry in life that we choose, and others that simply choose us. But the heaviest, I've found, are often the ones we don't even realize we're still shouldering. The lingering sting of a past injustice, the raw wound of a betrayal, the quiet hum of an unresolved conflict. Forgiveness. It's a word tossed about so easily, yet its true meaning, its liberating power, often remains elusive. For most of my life, I viewed fights as battles to be won, or at least strategically navigated. But a lifetime of navigating disagreements, some sharp and sudden, others dull and long-lasting, has taught me that the deepest victory isn't in triumphing over another, but in freeing yourself. And that, my dear Susan, is where true forgiveness truly begins. It's an odd thing, isn't it? We spend years building fences, cataloging grievances, and preparing for the next skirmish, all the while believing we're protecting ourselves. But what if in our staunch defense, we're actually imprisoning our own hearts? That's the first vital truth I unearthed on my journey. Forgiveness isn't about excusing the other person. It's about liberating yourself. I remember a particularly frustrating incident during my first solo backpacking trip through Southeast Asia many years ago. I was in a bustling market, haggling for a hand-woven textile, feeling quite pleased with my linguistic prowess and bargaining skills. Or so I thought. I paid what I believed was an agreed-upon price, only to find the vendor suddenly demanding more, insisting I misunderstood. The situation escalated, voices were raised, and I ended up paying a significantly higher amount just to extract myself from the escalating commotion. For days afterwards, that incident festered. I replayed it in my mind, stewing in indignation, convinced I'd been cheated, disrespected, taken advantage of. It ate at me, spoiling the vibrant colors of the temples, dampening the taste of exotic street food. I wrote stern letters in my head, imagined eloquent rebukes. And all the while, the vendor was likely on to their next customer, having forgotten me entirely. It took a quiet evening, sitting by the Mekong River as the sun dipped below the horizon, for a moment of clarity to pierce through my stubborn pride. What good was this anger doing me? It wasn't punishing the vendor. It was robbing me of the beauty and joy of my adventure. It was a heavy pack I was voluntarily carrying, dragging down my spirits. I wasn't excusing the vendor's behavior. I was simply choosing not to let it define my experience. I chose to forgive the incident, to release my grip on that anger, not for their sake, but for my own peace. The moment I did, it felt as though a physical weight had lifted. The world seemed brighter, my stride lighter. It was a profound lesson in self-preservation, cloaked in the simple act of letting go. So I invite you to ask yourself, Susan, what indignation are you still carrying that is heavier than you realize? What past slight, what perceived wrong continues to cast a shadow over your present? It might be worth asking yourself what good it truly does for you to hold on to it. This leads me to the second truth I discovered. True forgiveness is often a winding path, not a sudden destination. We hear stories of instant forgiveness, and while those moments of grace are indeed powerful, for most of us, it's a process, sometimes a slow and arduous one, like clearing an overgrown garden. You don't just wave a wand and all the weeds vanish. You pull them up root by root, and sometimes they grow back.
My relationship with my Aunt Eleanor was a prime example. She was a woman of strong opinions and even stronger expectations, particularly for young women. My decision to pursue a career, to travel extensively, and to remain unmarried All of these choices were met with a persistent, if polite, disapproval that felt like a low-grade hum of criticism throughout my early adult life. I adored her in many ways, but our conversations often left me feeling defensive, misunderstood, and frankly, quite cross. I wanted her approval, and her inability to give it, or even to truly understand my path, became a source of quiet resentment. For years, I told myself I'd forgiven her, yet every time a barbed comment would slip out. "Still gallivanting around the globe, Hazel? A woman needs roots, you know?" The old hurt would resurface. It was like a well-worn book I kept revisiting, finding the same chapter of grievance marked with an invisible bookmark. It wasn't until much later, when I visited her as she was nearing the end of her life, that I truly began the arduous work. She was frail, her sharp edges softened by age and illness. As I sat by her bedside, listening to her wander through memories, I began to see her not as the disapproving aunt, but as a woman shaped by her own era, her own fears, her own understanding of love and security. Her criticisms, I realized, weren't born of malice, but of a deeply ingrained concern for my well-being, however misguided I felt it to be. That visit wasn't a sudden epiphany, but it was the start of a slow, steady release. It was seeing her humanity, her vulnerability. I didn't erase the past comments, but I began to recontextualize them, to understand them, and eventually to truly let them go. It was a forgiveness that unfolded over weeks, then months, then years after her passing. Each time I remembered her, replacing the old sting with a quiet affection. Forgiveness is rarely a single poof. It's often a series of small, intentional acts of understanding, of compassion, of choosing peace over pain, until one day you realize the weight is gone. If something in this is resonating with you, I'd be so grateful to know. You might just type "I'm listening" in the comments below, so we know we're in this together. It helps to know we are not alone on this path. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, despite our willingness to understand and release, a relationship remains broken beyond repair. This brings me to my third insight. Sometimes, true forgiveness means accepting that reconciliation isn't possible, but peace certainly is. This particular lesson felt counterintuitive to my younger self, who believed that forgiveness must lead to a mended fence, a renewed connection. But life, and a certain amount of stubborn human nature, has taught me otherwise. There was a time, early in my career, when I had a rather intense disagreement with a colleague over a significant project. It was a clash of wills, a fundamental difference in approach, and a spectacular breakdown in communication. I tried. Truly, I did, to bridge the divide. I offered olive branches, I sought common ground. I even swallowed my pride more than once. But some wounds, especially those touched by ego and perceived slights, simply refused to heal. Despite my internal efforts to forgive the situation and the person, the professional relationship became untenable. We simply couldn't work together without an underlying tension that poisoned the atmosphere. It was a difficult decision, but after much deliberation, I chose to seek a transfer to a different department. It wasn't an admission of defeat, it was an act of self-preservation. I realized that my continued effort to force a reconciliation that wasn't meant to be was causing me more stress and unhappiness than the initial conflict itself. My friend Elias, who always has a grounding metaphor up his sleeve, once told me, "Hazel, sometimes when you try to force two pieces of wood together that just don't fit, you don't make them one, you just splinter both." That resonated deeply. I had to forgive the outcome, forgive the impossibility of a mended relationship, and instead focus on finding peace for myself.
This type of forgiveness isn't about condoning the other person's actions or pretending the hurt never happened. It's about severing the emotional cord that binds you to that pain, regardless of whether the other person acknowledges their part or seeks amends. It's a quiet, internal declaration of independence. It allows you to move forward, to create new connections, and to build a life free from the emotional residue of what couldn't be. It's a pragmatic approach, certainly, but one rooted in a profound self-care, and ultimately in a spiritual understanding that not every wrong can or must be righted in this earthly realm to find your own peace. It frees up energy you might otherwise expend on a battle that can't be won. And then there's the quietest, yet often the most challenging form of forgiveness: forgiving yourself. This one, for a fiercely independent and self-reliant woman like myself, was perhaps the hardest knot to untangle. We often hold ourselves to impossible standards, replaying our own missteps, our own perceived failures, with a harshness we would never apply to others. I've always believed in careful planning, in being prepared for any eventuality, especially when it came to finances and navigating my independent path. But life, as it often does, threw a few curveballs that even my meticulously organized mind couldn't anticipate. There was a period early in my professional life when I made a rather significant financial misjudgment, swayed by what seemed like a promising investment. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was a substantial setback for my dreams of early retirement and extensive travel. For years, I berated myself for it. I, the pragmatic, the prepared, the librarian who always cross-referenced her facts, had made a mistake. The shame, the disappointment in myself was a constant companion. It felt like a blemish on my carefully crafted narrative of self-sufficiency. I would replay the conversations, the research I should have done, the red flags I missed. This self-flagellation was far more damaging than the financial loss itself. It was eroding my confidence, making me hesitant to take calculated risks, and ironically, undermining the very adventure spirit I cherished. It was through quiet contemplation, and perhaps a gentle nudge from the wisdom I found in the scriptures, that I realized I was holding myself captive. The verse, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you," began to resonate in a new way. It wasn't just about others. It was about extending that same grace inward. If I believed in a God of grace and forgiveness, how could I deny it to myself? I had to acknowledge that I was human. I had made a decision based on the best information I had at the time. I learned from it. I adapted. And eventually I recovered, perhaps even stronger and wiser for the experience. Forgiving myself wasn't about excusing the mistake, but about accepting my humanity, releasing the shame, and offering myself the same compassion I would readily offer a friend. It was an act of profound self-love, and it freed up so much mental and emotional energy that I could channel back into my life, my travels, and my passions. It allowed me to move forward, unburdened by past errors, knowing that every step, even a misstep, is part of the journey. So, what does a lifetime of navigating fights, of sometimes winning and sometimes simply enduring, teach you about true forgiveness? It teaches you that it is rarely easy, but it is always freeing. It is a gift you give yourself first and foremost. It's an active choice, often repeated, to release the grip of anger, resentment, and bitterness. It's about understanding that holding on to grievances is like clasping hot coals. You're the one who gets burnt. It teaches you the profound peace that comes from detaching yourself from the need for an apology that may never come, or a reconciliation that isn't meant to be. It shows you the strength in accepting your own imperfections and extending grace to yourself. And woven through it all, it reinforces the enduring Christian message that forgiveness, in its truest form, is an echo of divine mercy, a path towards healing, wholeness, and a quiet, steadfast joy. It's not about weakness, dear Susan. It's about a strength that flows from compassion, from wisdom,
and from a deep understanding of what truly serves your spirit. It's about choosing to live fully, unburdened. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with me, allowing these reflections to perhaps stir some thoughts within your own heart. If there was just one point that resonated with you today, perhaps about forgiving yourself or letting go of a long-held grievance, I gently encourage you to carry it with you into the coming days. If you find comfort, insight, or a quiet sense of companionship in these stories, I would be truly grateful if you would consider subscribing to Elders Echoes so we can continue to share this path together. With a grateful heart, this is Hazel.